Hey everyone, my name is Yogesh Ingole. I'm a PM with Facebook AI, and today I'll be talking to you about my journey of hacking my personal life with the help of OKRs. If you're someone who has been using OKRs at work on a day-to-day basis and you're already familiar with it, it's great. But if you come from a world where you are not as familiar with the concept of OKRs, don't worry about it. We'll cover the basics along the way, and then we'll tell stories. Two stories. One is about mountaineering. One is about parenting. We'll keep it light, so stick around. A little bit about me. I come from coding background. After my undergrad in computer science, I took a job in software engineering, worked with a few organizations like Intel, Cisco, etc. Before I decided I wanted to move to the business side of the house. I took a couple of years away from work, went to USC, got my MBA. And since then, I have spent time in PM capacity at various different organizations, VMware, NVIDIA, and most recently with Facebook. Here at Facebook right now, I'm working with a passionate group of people who are trying to figure out how we can make AI more responsible. It's an exciting space to be in and really a fulfilling problem to kind of work on. And so in all my years of working on building products, whether it's in PM capacity or engineering capacity, one thing that I can say for certain is that building products is hard. I mean, just the sheer number of people that have to come together, the total number of dependencies that are involved, the tasks that need to be managed, the schedules and deadlines that need to be managed, all of that is humongous. And yet somehow we manage to do all of that just fine. We get through it fine. We deliver the products, we ship the things, and we wrap up our work days with a smile on the face. And then we go back home. And for some reason, even the littlest of the things in our day-to-day lives sometimes seem to overwhelm us. I mean, here we are solving the rocket science on a day-to-day basis at work. And back at home, we often have this feeling of not having enough control over our personal lives. And sure enough, not everyone feels the same way. Some of us have that feeling more than the others, and that's totally fine. But we are all somewhere there on that spectrum. And I wonder though, why? Why is there that difference? The reasons can be many, but one of the reasons for sure is that at work, we have a certain level of rigor that we bring in to make our work lives really smooth. We put ourselves through trainings, teaching ourselves skills that we can use, whether it's effective communication, task management, all of those things. We learn to treat people with respect. We learn to manage difficult things, and so there are all the skills and tools that we use at work. And somehow we conveniently forget that we have all those skills and tools at our disposal, and we go back to our personal lives and start to reinvent that wheel many times. And specifically thinking about it from the angle of product management, where in my everyday role, I'm working on making tough decisions. I'm prioritizing things every day. I'm bringing my personal best when it comes to interpersonal interactions. I wonder, are there things from our day-to-day work lives that we can carry into our personal lives to make our lives at least a little better? I mean, even if we can improve them at least a little bit, would that be so bad? And so that thought led me to start focusing on one of the tools that is in our arsenal for product management, which is objectives and key results, or OKRs. Now, again, if you're familiar with the OKRs, feel free to not listen to me for the next couple of minutes. But if you're not, here is a quick primer on what OKRs are. OKR stand for objectives and key results. The objectives piece of it tells us what, and the key results piece of it tells us how. It's basically a collaborative tool for setting challenging goals with measurable results. And the emphasis of in that statement is on the word measurable. It's a concept that Andy Grove of Intel pioneered, and then John Doerr started coaching this concept to organizations around the globe. And now with adoption of it by companies like Google and many others, it is now starting to become a de facto standard for doing things in modern product management. There's a long list of do's and don'ts and the right and wrong ways of doing it. But at a high level, a few things to keep in mind when you're trying to put together OKRs are you want to make sure that you have a good balance of committed and aspirational OKRs, the OKRs that you'll meet for sure, and the OKRs that are kind of your stretch goals. You want your key results to be measurable, so much so that if you're doing your OKRs right, if you measure the key results, you want to know whether or not you were successful with the objective that you had chosen. It must be time bound after all. I mean, if you're not measuring it against any particular time window, you're not really measuring it. And finally, it's a living and breathing thing. You don't just make OKRs and forget. They keep evolving over time. And so a good practice is to kind of review them periodically and iterate on them as you kind of go along. To see OKRs in action, one example that I picked from the book, Measure What Matters, it's an OKR that YouTube had set for their growth team. The objective read something like reach 1 billion hours of watch time per day. And to meet that objective, then they go on to list 3 specific key results that they would track to make sure that they're making progress towards that objective. An example being launching YouTube VR experience to grow VR catalog from X to Y videos. Now, notice that they don't just talk about launching an experience, but they talk about launching an experience and moving a very particular growth metric along with it, right? And that's exactly the idea of OKRs. You want to be very crisp. You want to make sure that it's measurable, and that ways it's a very good indication of whether or not you are actually successful with the objective that you have chosen for yourself. Now, OKRs have many, many benefits, but at the end of the day, most of it boils down to 2 basic things, the goal setting and execution. The objectives part of it basically refers to the goal setting, which tells us, are we focusing on the important things? Are we focusing on the things that really matter? And are we prioritizing them as such? And then the key results part of it tells us, are we executing correctly? And so by being able to identify the milestones that are actually measurable, we can make sure that we are actually making progress towards those objectives. So 2 things, goal setting and execution. And those are the 2 things that we're going to talk about through the rest of this talk. Let's start with the execution part of it, the key results. And that's time for our first story, as I promised. And this story is about mountaineering. In the summer of, I think 2018, I decided to start getting into mountaineering as a hobby. I was always an outdoors enthusiast. I was into hiking. I loved backpacking every chance I got, and I had this tremendous passion for the mountains. And it was one of those things I had been meaning to do for a long time. And one of the first mountains the real mountains that I decided to climb at the time was Mount Shasta, which is at the border of California and Oregon. It stands tall at over 14,000 feet. And I knew going in that it was going to be a hard experience. And so I started to train for it. I trained at least for a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, I was training for it. And you see where the story is going. The day when I actually ended up on the mountain, I was miserable. I mean, I suffered spectacularly. I was slowing my team down with frequent breaks. I was not prepared to carry the load in my pack that I actually had to carry on that day. And I was dehydrated. I finished all the water I was carrying on the way up, and on the way down, I was left with not a single drop of water. And that was, to say the least, it was a terrible, terrible experience. But then coming back down, when I came back, I set out to fix my training routine. I had a next climb coming up in another 6 weeks, and this time I decided to make a small tweak in my training plan. And what I did was I added measurable key results. I added measurable milestones. Um, at the time, I had not actually written down the OKRs, but the mental framework I had at the time read something like this. My objective was to show up prepared for the next climb in 6 weeks. And the key results were, number one, practice hiking 2,000 feet with 40 pounds of pack. That would ensure that I was actually prepared to be able to carry the weight that I would actually have to carry on the mountain. Key result two was to minimize breaks, no more than one break per 30 minutes. As I learned from my last mountaineering attempt was that stopping frequently on the soul was not only risky, it could also be deadly. And so I just did not have that luxury. And I wanted to make sure that I was prepared for that. Key result three was practice conserving water. Last time I ran out of water, and I wanted to make sure that I was being prepared. I was prepared for that. And so I set the key result to be consume no more than 16 ounces of water per 1,000 feet of elevation gain. And by doing all of that, finally, when I actually ended up back on the mountain, this time I felt like I was much, much better prepared. And since then, I've gone back to mountains frequently, almost every other summer. And if it wasn't for that disciplined training routine with focus on measurable results, I would have completely missed out on all of these beautiful experiences. All right, so moving on, objectives or the goal setting piece of the OKRs. And this is time for our second story, which is a story about parenting. Now, before I get into it, I should acknowledge that parenting tends to be a sensitive topic. There is always a case for overparenting, and there's a case against overparenting. And rest assured that this story is not about how to be a better parent, but it's rather about how to manage your own stress while you're being a parent. And the reason I say that is because I've never met another parent who did not have a self-doubt in whether or not they were doing the right things. To varying degree, they always have this concern. One day you wake up thinking, oh my God, am I doing too much? Maybe I need to give some more space to my child and cool it down a little bit. And the next day you wake up thinking, oh my God, am I doing enough? Am I being a responsible parent, or am I just being irresponsible and not paying attention enough? And so there's always that confusion and doubt in everyone's mind. And so one day I kind of decided to take on this doubt head on. And this time I leaned hard on OKR framework. And I'm not kidding about it. I actually wrote down my parenting OKRs. And this is what they look like. And this is not the exhaustive list of those OKRs, but this is a snapshot of some of those OKRs. What you're seeing here is 3 objectives. First one is to have fun. To me, this was the most important objective, as measured by things like at least 30 minutes of device-free time together every day, movie time once a week, and things like that, right? Small ways to measure it. Second objective is nurture empathy. Again, another very high priority objective. Raise the child to be self-sufficient. It was important, but it was slightly lower on the priority list for me. So if I did not meet the objective to my liking, I was kind of okay with that, for example. And so having figured out my own mental model for what was super important to me and what was not, it put me in a place where I was able to be comfortable with the choices I was making. For example, if I found myself watching a movie with my daughter, knowing that there was homework pending, I would not ask myself whether it's the right choice or not, whether I'm being irresponsible or not, because having fun was officially the important objective on my list. And I had the notes written down to kind of say that. And all of this has still, I don't believe it has made me a better parent, but what it has done for sure is it has made me a less worried parent, if nothing else. And to me, it's still a win, a check in the win column. And to wrap it all up, through my journey of leveraging the OKRs as a way to kind of tackle some of the personal challenges, a few things I learned are number one, find your balance. Don't want to overdo it. At the end of the day, you don't want your personal life to look like your work life, and you would want to maintain that distinction. So pick your battles, apply these frameworks and these tools and skills for the important problems that you're facing in life, and not necessarily for everything. Write it down. Number two, writing down helps a lot. I've noticed being able to refer back to what you have written is a great way to make sure that your goalpost is not moving. Number three, socialize it. Telling other people, it helps making sure that you are accountable. I personally did not do a very good job at it, but in a way, this talk is a step in that direction. And number four, keep it flexible. You will come across many do's and don'ts and right ways and wrong ways of doing OKRs and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's all about what works for you. So figure out what works for you and feel free to do that. So with all that said, I'll finally leave you with this. By talking about all of this, we are barely starting to scratch the surface. I used OKRs to kind of tackle a couple of the challenges in my life, but that's not the entire list of possibilities. You could use it for tackling any of the challenges, whether it's for your fitness goals, whether it's relationships, hobbies, mindfulness, whatever it could be. And why just OKRs? Think beyond that. There are so many other skills that we use in our day-to-day work lives that probably have a place in our personal lives where we can leverage them and make our lives better, whether it's your awesome skills of daily task management, or whether it's the best practices you use in communication, your inclusive behavior at work. I would definitely encourage you to explore using some of these things in your personal lives to see how, if at all, that helps with your lives. And as you go through it, I would love to hear about your experiences, and I'm looking forward to hearing your stories. Thank you for listening.